Nobody could tame Vampire King's bat. Then a little girl did something shocking. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The Vampire King had ruled over his kingdom for centuries. Known for his terrifying power, his icy demeanor, and the shadow that loomed over anyone who dared to challenge him. But of all the things that gave him control, there was one that remained uncontrollable: his bat. This bat, an ancient and monstrous creature, was his closest companion, and also his greatest threat. Despite being bound to him by a mysterious force, it could not be tamed, no matter how many vampires tried. Warriors, mages, and even his most trusted soldiers had attempted to soothe its wild spirit, but all failed. The bat's ferocity and unpredictability had made it impossible for anyone to get close, let alone train or tame it. The Vampire King had long given up hope of finding a solution. He had accepted that the bat would remain a symbol of his power, a creature that no one could control, not even him. In his vast, cold castle surrounded by towering walls of stone, the Vampire King would often stare at the bat from across the room, pondering the secret it held, an enigma he could never solve. His kingdom trembled at his every command, yet here, in the silence of his chambers, he faced the one thing he could not master. He often wondered if anyone could ever tame the beast that shared his very essence. Then one fateful night, during a raging storm, a small girl stumbled into his domain. Her name was Lila, a poor, humble child from the nearby village who had been caught in the storm and sought shelter in the castle. Little did she know, this was not just any castle, but the domain of the Vampire King and his untamable bat. Lila had no idea who lived here, nor did she understand the danger of her sudden intrusion. She was merely seeking refuge, her heart pounding as she stepped inside the grand, darkened halls. As Lila wandered through the halls, she found herself drawn toward the room where the bat was kept. It wasn't a choice, but a pull, as if the creature itself had summoned her. The moment she stepped closer to its cage, the bat grew still. Its wild eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time in centuries, it did not attack. Instead, it watched her with an almost curious gaze. Lila, still unaware of the danger, took a deep breath and extended her hand toward the cage. To her surprise, the bat didn't react violently. It stayed calm, watching her, as though it were waiting for something. The moment Lila's fingers brushed the cage, the bat made a strange sound, a low, guttural hum. The Vampire King, watching from a distance, could hardly believe his eyes. He had never seen the bat behave this way, not even in the presence of his most loyal servants. It was as though the little girl held a secret power, a power that was unknowingly unlocking the creature's heart. The Vampire King could not look away. He had been ruling for centuries, watching over armies, kingdoms, and the fate of many lives, but nothing had ever intrigued him more than this moment. Could this fragile, unassuming girl really be the one to tame the creature that had eluded him for so long? The Vampire King could hardly believe his eyes. The small girl, Lila, stood in front of the bat's cage, her hands still extended. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't running away, nor was she retreating in fear like the others who had tried before. Instead, she stood there, unshaken, as if some invisible force had connected her to the wild creature. The Vampire King's heart beat harder in his chest, a mix of curiosity and disbelief washing over him. He had lived for centuries, ruled countless lands, and faced unimaginable threats, yet nothing had prepared him for this moment. For the first time in his life, he questioned his own power. What was it about this fragile, innocent girl that made the bat, a creature that had defied even the most powerful beings, obey her? The bat's eyes, once full of malice and rage, softened. It no longer hissed or growled in warning. Instead, it seemed almost docile, mesmerized by her presence. The Vampire King had seen many things in his long existence, but this was something entirely different. Slowly, Lila withdrew her hand from the cage, and the bat let out a low sound, almost like a purr, as it tilted its head, following her movements. It was as if the creature itself was trying to understand what had just happened. Lila stepped back, surprised by the bat's calmness. She turned, her face still filled with confusion. She had no idea what was going on or why the bat was behaving like this, but she felt no fear. She wasn't scared of the creature that had terrified everyone in the kingdom, the one that had left the vampire king powerless to control it. The vampire king, still watching from the shadows, knew this was no ordinary child. He had seen humans come and go, all of them insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But Lila was different. There was something about her that made him uneasy, something he could not quite place. It wasn't just her courage. It was something deeper. As Lila turned to leave, the bat flapped its wings once, the sound echoing through the stone chamber. She paused, feeling its eyes on her. She didn't know why, but she felt a strange connection to the creature. It was almost as if it was calling her, wanting her to stay. She turned back toward the cage, hesitant. The vampire king felt a flicker of something deep within him, an emotion he hadn't felt in centuries. Something he had thought he had lost long ago. Hope. He had ruled with an iron fist, cold and unyielding, but now, for the first time, he felt vulnerable. He had spent so many years trying to understand the bat's behavior, trying to control it, and yet this girl had done what he couldn't. He couldn't help but wonder. Could she be the key to unlocking everything? The moment lingered. And then, as if on cue, the bat made a noise, not threatening, but oddly friendly, almost as if inviting Lila closer. The vampire king watched her, his thoughts racing. She didn't belong here. She was just a simple girl, caught in a storm, seeking shelter. But now, she had done something that no one else had ever been able to do. She had changed everything. Lila, still unsure of what was happening, cautiously stepped toward the bat again. It watched her, its eyes softening with every step she took. She stood before the cage, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, to her astonishment, the bat pressed its face against the bars, as if offering her a silent gesture of trust. The vampire king's breath caught in his throat. This was impossible. He had never seen the bat act like this before. He knew he should intervene, but something inside him stopped him. There was a strange magnetism about Lila, a power that even he couldn't deny. She was no ordinary girl. The bat, now completely calm, lowered its wings and sat on the ground, waiting for her next move. Lila looked at it, then back at the vampire king, who was watching her from the shadows. She felt his gaze, heavy and intense, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she took another step forward, her hand reaching for the cage once more. For the first time, the bat didn't pull away or hiss. It simply stared at her, waiting. Lila's fingers brushed against the cold metal of the cage, and in that instant, she felt something shift. A bond, unseen yet powerful, formed between her and the bat. The vampire king was left standing in the shadows, his mind racing. He couldn't explain what had just happened, but he knew one thing. The bat had chosen her. And with that, everything would change. The question now was, what would she do with the power she had unknowingly awakened? The vampire king stood in the shadows, watching the strange scene unfold before him. Lila, the young girl, had done something no one else had ever managed. She had tamed the bat. But what did that really mean? He had spent centuries trying to understand the creature that shared his dark domain, and now, just by standing in front of it, Lila had achieved what others could not. He felt a strange shift within him, something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. But with that hope came a question. Was it truly the girl who had tamed the bat, or was there something else at play? The bat, now lying peacefully on the stone floor, looked completely different. Its once wild eyes were soft, almost trusting, as it watched Lila. She, in turn, stared back at it, her heart racing. With both excitement and confusion. She had never experienced anything like this before. She had only come into the castle to seek shelter from the storm. But now, she stood in the presence of the vampire king's bat, a creature that had terrorized many and was feared by even the bravest warriors. And yet, here she was, unafraid, with a bond forming between her and the creature. The vampire king stepped out of the shadows, his tall form casting an imposing presence. Lila turned to face him, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. She had never expected to find herself in such a position. In front of her stood a being older than time itself, a ruler of the night, the king of all vampires. Yet, in this moment, she felt neither fear nor dread. She only felt the pull of the bat's calming presence. "How did you do it?" The vampire king's voice was deep, like a rumble of thunder, but there was no anger in his tone, only curiosity. Lila blinked, unsure how to answer. I don't know. I didn't feel afraid. And when I reached out to it, it didn't move away. It calmed down." The vampire king's eyes narrowed slightly, studying her. His mind raced. Could it be that this fragile human child possessed a power that he could not understand? His kingdom had been plagued by the wild nature of this bat for centuries, and now, a mere girl had somehow gained control over it. It was baffling, yet undeniably true. The vampire king took a step forward, his gaze never leaving Lila. "You must have a special connection to the creature," he said slowly, his tone thoughtful. Lila shrugged, still unsure of what was happening. "I don't know. Maybe it just needed someone to be kind to it. Everyone else was afraid, and maybe it just needed someone who wasn't scared of it." The vampire king's expression softened slightly. There was something in her words that struck a chord deep within him. He had ruled with fear for so long, but here was a girl who had approached the bat with nothing but kindness. It made him question everything he had ever known. "What is your name, child?" The vampire king's voice was gentler now, though still commanding. "Lila," she replied, her voice barely above. A whisper. The vampire king studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "Lila, you have done something that no one else has ever been able to do. You have tamed my bat, and for that, I owe you something." Lila's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined that the vampire king, the ruler of all vampires, would owe her anything. "Oh me?" she asked, confused. "Yes," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "In all my years, I have never met someone like you. You possess something that others do not, something that even I cannot explain. I am curious, Lila. Tell me, what else are you capable of?" Lila's breath caught in her throat. She had never thought of herself as special. She was just a poor, ordinary girl. But here, in the vampire king's presence, she felt something awakening inside her, something she had never felt before. She didn't know what it was, but it was as if the very air around her was charged with energy. "I don't know," she admitted, feeling small under the vampire king's intense gaze. "I've only ever known how to survive. But maybe it's not about what I can do. Maybe it's about what I can give." The vampire king's eyes softened at her words. He had seen many come and go, all seeking power, fame, or wealth. But Lila was different. She didn't seek anything for herself. It was as if she had something pure, something he had lost long ago. For the first time in centuries, the vampire king felt something stir within him, something unfamiliar. Something that was not cold and dark, but warm and hopeful. He took a step closer to her, his voice low. "You are not like the others, Lila. I see that now. You have something rare, and I will protect you, no matter what." Lila looked up at him, a mix of fear and wonder in her eyes. The vampire king, the creature who had once been feared by all, was now offering her protection. But what did this mean? What would happen next? Lila had no answers, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life was about to change forever, and she didn't know if she was ready for what was to come. The vampire king could not shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Lila, the girl who had come to him by accident, had somehow captured something he thought was lost forever, his trust. For centuries, he had ruled with fear, but now, in her presence, he felt something he could not name. As he watched her interact with the bat, he realized that Lila was no ordinary girl. She had a connection to the creatures of the night, a bond he could not understand. And that bond intrigued him. Days passed, and Lila found herself living in the vampire king's castle. Despite being a servant, she was treated with a kindness that was unheard of in the court of such a powerful ruler. She had no idea why, but the bat, which had once terrorized the castle, seemed to follow her wherever she went, always watching her with a strange affection. The servants, though still wary of the creature, seemed to accept Lila's newfound bond with the bat, and the once ominous creature became a curious companion. One evening, while Lila was tending to the castle's gardens, the vampire king approached her, his presence as commanding as ever. Lila looked up from the flowers she was planting, startled by his sudden appearance. "Lila," he began, his deep voice cutting through the stillness of the night. I have been watching you. There is something in you that I cannot explain. Lila met his gaze, her heart beating faster. She had never known the Vampire King to speak to anyone in such a way. His words were never soft, never inviting. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling slightly, unsure of where this conversation would lead. You have tamed the bat, the Vampire King said, as if that simple fact should explain everything. But there is more to you than just that. There is a power within you, one that even I cannot comprehend. What I want to know is whether you understand it. Lila took a step back, her mind racing. A power within her? She had never felt anything like that. She was just a girl, a simple village girl who had wandered into the castle seeking shelter. I don't understand, she whispered, looking down at her hands as if they might reveal some hidden secret. I never asked for this. I only wanted to help the bat. I didn't know it would be like this. The Vampire King stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I know, he said, his voice softer now. But this power, it is something that cannot be ignored. It has already changed the fate of my bat, and it will change the course of this kingdom. Lila swallowed hard, unsure of what he was implying. Was he saying that she had the power to change everything? Could a simple act of kindness really shift the balance of power in a kingdom as old as his? She glanced over at the bat, now sitting calmly in the garden, watching her. For the first time, she felt a connection to it that went beyond just a shared moment of quiet. There was something about the creature that felt like a part of her, as if they were tied together by something far deeper than fate. What are you saying? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from me? The Vampire King's expression softened, and for a moment, Lila saw something vulnerable in his eyes, something he had long hidden from the world. I do not know what this power means, but I do know that it is dangerous. You are no longer just a girl from the village. You are something more, and I cannot allow that power to go unnoticed. There are others who will want to control you, to use you for their own gain, and you will need protection. Lila's heart raced. She had only wanted to help, to make a difference in the world, but now she was caught in a web of power, magic, and dark forces she had no control over. She didn't want to be a pawn in someone else's game. I don't want to be used, she said firmly, her eyes meeting the Vampire King's with determination. I just want to live my life. The Vampire King studied her for a long moment before speaking again. I understand, and I will not use you, but I cannot let you go either. You are too valuable. He paused, his gaze shifting to the bat, still sitting quietly by Lila's side. The bat knows this as well, and it is not the only one who is bound to you. Lila was about to ask what he meant when a loud crash echoed through the castle. She turned, startled, and saw a figure standing in the doorway, a figure cloaked in shadows. The Vampire King's expression darkened. Stay here, he commanded, his voice cold once more. He turned swiftly, his cape flowing behind him as he made his way toward the intruder. Lila stood frozen, watching as the Vampire King confronted the figure. Her heart pounded in her chest. Who was this? And what did they want? She had barely begun to understand her connection to the bat, to the strange power inside her, and now someone was threatening to take it away. The figure stepped forward, revealing a tall, cloaked figure with glowing red eyes. I have come for the girl, the figure said, their voice a low, menacing whisper. Lila's blood ran cold. The Vampire King's expression darkened as he moved between her and the stranger. You will not take her, he growled, his eyes flashing with a dangerous intensity. Lila took a step back, her mind racing. What was going on? And why had this figure come for her? She had no answers, but one thing was clear. Her life had just become far more complicated than she ever could have imagined. The Vampire King stepped forward, his body a wall between Lila and the mysterious figure that had appeared at the door. His eyes, once cold and calculating, now burned with a protective fury. The figure in the doorway was cloaked in shadows, the faint red glow of its eyes the only thing visible in the darkness. Its presence sent a chill through the room, and Lila instinctively took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea who this person was or what they wanted with her, but she could feel the danger radiating from them. The Vampire King's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Leave now, or I will end you, he said, his words filled with a cold authority that made the air itself feel heavier. The figure's red eyes glowed brighter, and a twisted smile spread across its face. You cannot protect her forever, Vampire King. The figure replied in a low, mocking tone. She belongs to us now. The Vampire King's eyes darkened, his hands clenched into fists. She belongs to no one, least of all to you. The figure stepped forward, the shadows swirling around it like a cloak. You cannot stop what is already in motion. The girl's power is not hers to control. She is merely a tool for something far greater than her. Lila, still standing behind the Vampire King, felt a shiver run down her spine. Power? What power? She had no idea what they were talking about. She had never felt anything other than the connection she had with the bat, and even that was confusing. She was just a simple girl, not some powerful weapon. What do you mean? Lila asked, her voice trembling. The figure chuckled, its voice smooth and sinister. You know nothing, child. You have no idea what you've unleashed. The bat is only the beginning. There are others who will come for you, and they will not be as merciful as the Vampire King. The Vampire King's face darkened, his hands tightening into fists. Enough. You will not threaten her. The figure let out a soft laugh. You think you can stop it? You think you can protect her from the truth? It raised its hand, and the shadows around it seemed to shift and swirl, as if they were alive. Lila could feel the temperature drop in the room, the air growing thick with a strange energy. What truth? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure smiled, its red eyes gleaming with an unsettling hunger. The truth about who she really is. The truth about the power she carries inside her. Lila's heart skipped a beat. What power? What were they talking about? She had always felt like an ordinary girl, struggling to survive in a world that had never been kind to her. The Vampire King stepped forward again, his presence overwhelming. Leave, he commanded, his voice low and dangerous. Now. The figure hesitated for a moment, its eyes flicking between the Vampire King and Lila. Then, with a final mocking grin, it disappeared into the shadows, leaving only a lingering sense of unease in the air. The Vampire King stood in the doorway for a moment, his body tense, his mind racing. He knew that this was only the beginning. Whoever that figure was, it had come for Lila, and it would not be the last time. The moment the figure vanished, Lila stepped forward, her voice shaking. Who was that? What did they mean? What power do I have? The Vampire King turned to her, his expression unreadable. You have something inside you, something that I don't fully understand. Something that has been awakened. He paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. I thought you were just a girl, a simple child from the village. But now, I see that you are something far more important. Lila's mind was spinning. She had no idea what the Vampire King was talking about. She was just a girl, trying to survive, nothing more. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice filled with confusion. I don't have any power. I'm just me. The Vampire King's gaze softened, though there was still an intensity in his eyes. It's not just you, Lila. There is something more. You've tamed the bat, a creature that no one else could control. That alone is proof of the power inside you. But there is more to it. And now, we must figure out what that is before others come to claim it. Lila felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She had never asked for any of this. She had never wanted to be special, to be caught up in some grand scheme. She just wanted to live a simple life. But now, her world was spinning out of control. She was no longer just a girl from the village. She was someone who had awakened a power that others wanted to control. And that power would make her a target. What do we do now? Lila asked, her voice barely audible. The Vampire King's eyes hardened once more. We protect you, he said. And we find out what this power is before it's too late. The shadows in the castle seemed to grow deeper as the Vampire King turned, his gaze never leaving Lila. She had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. Her life would never be the same again. Lila sat in the dimly lit chamber, her mind racing with the words the Vampire King had spoken. She had no idea what power she was supposed to possess, nor why she had been chosen. Her heart pounded in her chest as the realization hit her. She was no longer just a poor village girl. She was something more, something that others would seek to control, and the Vampire King had made it clear that she could not escape what had been awakened within her. She stared at the bat, which now rested calmly beside her, its dark eyes following her every movement. It had become more than just a creature. It was her connection to something much greater, and in a strange way, It seemed to be her only ally in a world that was quickly becoming far too dangerous. You don't know what they want, do you? The Vampire King's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to find him standing in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, his eyes still filled with the intensity he had carried since their first meeting. She shook her head. No, I don't. What is this power? What's inside of me? The Vampire King walked toward her, his movements graceful and deliberate. I don't know yet, he admitted, his voice lower now, almost thoughtful. But whatever it is, it's important. It's something that others will try to claim for themselves, and they will stop at nothing to get it. Lila's breath caught in her throat. She didn't want to be the center of some dark conspiracy. She didn't want to be the key to some ancient power. She just wanted to live. But as the Vampire King had said, it was too late. The moment she had tamed the bat, everything had changed. So what happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King stopped in front of her, his piercing gaze studying her carefully. We need to prepare, he said, his tone hardening. Others will come. I can't protect you forever, Lila. But we can fight. Lila's stomach twisted. She had never been a fighter. She had never known anything other than the hard life she had lived in the village, struggling to survive day by day. And now, she was supposed to face something much bigger, something she didn't understand. She wasn't sure she was ready for this. How? She asked, her voice faltering. How can I fight if I don't even know what I'm fighting for? The Vampire King's eyes softened for just a moment, a flicker of something that resembled sympathy passing through them. You're not alone in this, he said quietly. I'll help you. But you need to understand something. This power you have, it's a part of you now. And whether you like it or not, it's something you'll have to control. Because if you don't, it will control you. Lila nodded slowly, but doubt lingered in her chest. She didn't know if she could control anything, let alone some hidden power she couldn't even begin to understand. Where do we start? She asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. The Vampire King stepped back, his gaze never leaving her. First, we need to train. You need to understand your abilities, and I need to figure out what they mean. But most importantly, we need to keep you safe. There will be others who will try to get to you. They'll come for the power inside of you, and I won't let them take you. Lila felt a chill run down her spine. The weight of the situation was sinking in. She wasn't just an innocent bystander anymore. She was a target. And the only thing standing between her and the dangers that lay ahead was the Vampire King. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Lila admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King looked at her, his expression hardening once more. No one is ever ready, he said firmly. But you don't have a choice. This power isn't just some gift. It's a burden, one that you'll have to carry. And you'll carry it until you understand it, until you can control it. And when you do, you'll be stronger than you ever thought possible. Lila swallowed hard, trying to hold back the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. She had always believed she was just a small, insignificant part of the world. But now, she was being thrust into a world she didn't understand, a world full of vampires, ancient powers, and dark forces. She didn't know if she could survive it. But she also knew that she couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything that had already happened. What's the first step? Lila asked, her voice steady despite the fear she felt inside. The Vampire King studied her for a long moment before responding. We begin your training tomorrow, he said. But for tonight, rest. You'll need your strength. Lila nodded, but as she lay down in the bed they had prepared for her, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. She had no idea what her future held, but she knew one thing. Her life would never be the same again. And the power inside her, the one she had no control over, was only the beginning of what was to come. The days that followed were a blur for Lila. The Vampire King had kept his word, starting her training in secret, away from the prying eyes of his court. She had never imagined that her life would take such a turn. One moment, she was a simple girl seeking shelter from a storm, and now, she was being trained by one of the most powerful beings in existence to control a power she barely understood. Every morning, the Vampire King would arrive in the castle's vast training hall, his presence overwhelming. Lila would find herself standing before him, heart pounding in her chest, as she prepared for each lesson. The training was intense. At first, Lila struggled to grasp even the basics of controlling the strange energy that pulsed within her. The bat, once a wild and untamable creature, had now become a constant presence in her life, accompanying her wherever she went. It was as if the bat had become her guide, her connection to the power she needed to control. With each lesson, she felt a flicker of understanding, but it was never enough. The Vampire King watched her with a gaze that was both patient and unwavering. "You have the power to command, Lila," he would say, his voice calm but firm. "But power is not enough. You must learn to focus it, to control it. If you fail to do this, the power will consume you." Lila knew he was right. She could feel the power within her, an untamed force that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. But she couldn't yet control it. The fear of what would happen if she failed haunted her thoughts. One evening, as the training session drew to a close, the Vampire King approached her with a rare softness in his eyes. "You've made progress," he said, his tone almost approving. "But you need more. You need to learn what this power means and how to use it, not just for yourself, but for the kingdom." Lila looked up at him, confused. "For the kingdom?" she asked. "Why would I need to use this power for anything beyond surviving?" The Vampire King's gaze darkened slightly. "Because, Lila, the power you hold is not just a gift, it's a weapon. And in the wrong hands, it could destroy everything." Lila swallowed hard. She had never asked for this. She had never wanted to be anyone's weapon. But now, it seemed like that was exactly what she had become. The Vampire King stepped closer, his presence commanding. "There are forces at play, forces that seek to use your power. Forces that will stop at nothing to claim it for themselves. You will need to be stronger, not just for yourself, but for the kingdom's survival. The fate of many depends on you." The weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders. How could she, a mere girl, be the one to save a kingdom, to control a power she didn't even understand? She had always been small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But now, she was at the center of something much larger than herself. "I don't know if I can do this," Lila said, her voice trembling. "I'm not strong enough." The Vampire King looked at her with an intensity that seemed to pierce through her doubts. "You are stronger than you think," he said softly. "The strength is within you. You just have to unlock it. I will help you, but you must be willing to fight. Are you ready for that?" Lila hesitated, unsure of what to say. The Vampire King was offering his help, but what did that really mean? Could she really do this? She had no choice but to try. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered, "but I'll try." The Vampire King nodded, as if he had expected this answer. "Good," he said. "That is all I ask." He turned and motioned for her to follow. "Come. We begin tomorrow. The real training begins now." Lila followed him, the weight of his words still heavy on her heart. She had never felt more afraid in her life, yet there was something else growing inside her, a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this. She had to. The Vampire King was right. The kingdom was at stake. As she walked beside him, she couldn't help but wonder what the future held for her. Would she be able to control this power? Would she be able to protect the kingdom and herself? One thing was certain. Her life had been changed forever, and there was no going back. The days that followed were filled with grueling training. Each session was more intense than the last, pushing Lila to her limits. The Vampire King was relentless, demanding that she learn not only to control the power inside her, but to harness it in ways she could barely understand. The air in the training hall was thick with tension, each lesson feeling like a battle against herself. Yet, despite the pressure, something within her began to change. Lila felt the power stir inside her every time she focused on it. Each attempt to control it felt like a step closer to mastering the force that had been awakened within her. But it was still so foreign. She had never been taught anything like this before. The first time she summoned the bat with a mere thought, she had been astonished. The creature appeared at her side almost immediately, its eyes glowing with an intensity that matched her own. The Vampire King had been watching closely and had nodded in approval. "Good," he had said. "But control is not enough. You must learn to command it, not just summon it. Power without control is chaos." Lila knew he was right. She had felt the chaos of the power, the way it surged within her when she wasn't focused. But the more she practiced, the more she began to understand how to control it. The connection between her and the bat grew stronger. She could feel its energy, almost like it was part of her now. As days turned into weeks, Lila started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could control this power after all. One evening, as the sun began to set, Lila found herself standing in the center of the training hall, alone. The Vampire King had given her the night off to rest, but she couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. The more she practiced, the more questions arose. What exactly was this power? Why had it chosen her? And most importantly, why had the Vampire King been so intent on making sure she learned to control it? As she pondered these questions, the bat appeared before her, its wings gliding silently through the air. Lila instinctively reached out, and the bat landed on her arm, its claws gently gripping her skin. She could feel its power now, a warm, pulsing energy that flowed through her veins. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and focused. The bat's presence seemed to amplify the power inside her, the energy swirling around her. Like a storm, she raised her free hand and, without thinking, willed the bat to fly. To her surprise, it obeyed immediately, soaring through the air in graceful circles. Lila's heart raced with excitement. She could feel the power responding to her command, the bat's movements almost synchronized with her own thoughts. But as the bat flew higher, Lila felt something shift. The power inside her began to grow too strong, too overwhelming. She could feel the chaos creeping in again, the wild energy threatening to spiral out of control. Panic surged in her chest. She had to stop it, but the more she tried to focus, the more the power seemed to resist. "Focus," she whispered to herself, her voice shaky. "Focus." Just as the bat was about to spiral out of control, Lila clenched her fist, forcing the power to settle. The bat froze midair, hovering motionless as if waiting for her next command. Slowly, cautiously, Lila brought her hand down, and the bat obeyed, gently landing on her arm once more. She exhaled shakily, her heart still pounding. The power inside her was like a storm that could either protect or destroy, and she was the one who had to learn to calm it. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hall, and Lila turned to find the Vampire King standing at the entrance. His eyes were steady, his face unreadable as he watched her. "You're improving," he said, his voice calm but intense. Lila nodded, wiping the sweat from her brow. "I'm trying," she said, her voice still shaky from the experience. "But it's hard. I don't know if I'll ever be able to control it completely." The Vampire King stepped forward, his gaze never leaving her. "You will," he said simply. "You have the potential to master this power. It's just a matter of time and discipline. You've already come further than I expected." Lila felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, but it was quickly replaced by doubt. "But what if I can't control it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if it gets out of hand and I hurt someone?" The Vampire King's expression softened slightly, but his tone remained firm. "You have control over the bat. You will have control over the rest. But you must keep your focus. The moment you let your fear take over, the power will take control of you." Lila nodded slowly, though a part of her still felt uncertain. The fear inside her was hard to shake, but she knew the Vampire King was right. If she didn't learn to control it, it would control her. As the training continued, so did the doubts in her mind. She wasn't sure if she could ever master the power that had been thrust upon her. But there was no turning back now. The world around her was changing, and she had to be ready. The Vampire King had warned her. There were forces out there that would stop at nothing to claim her power, and Lila couldn't afford to be weak. She had to become strong, not just for herself, but for the kingdom that was now tied to her fate. With each passing day, Lila could feel the weight of her responsibility growing heavier. But she also felt something else, something new. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could control this power after all. Lila stood alone in the vast courtyard of the Vampire King's castle, the night air heavy with the weight of the coming storm. The bat, now an ever-present companion, perched calmly on her outstretched arm, its eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. She had been training for weeks, each day more intense than the last, and still, the power inside her was unpredictable. There were days when she could command it with ease, and others when it felt like an untamable force, threatening to consume her. Tonight, however, something felt different. The energy around her seemed to hum with tension, and for the first time, she felt as if she might be on the edge of understanding just how to control it. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, focusing on the bat, on the power that flowed through her. The Vampire King's words echoed in her mind. Focus. Control. If you fail, the power will consume you. She reached for the bat, letting the energy guide her. Slowly, she felt the bat's wings begin to stir, the gentle pull of its energy matching her own. It was like a dance, her movements mirroring its own, and for a moment, she felt at peace. She could feel the bond between them, the way the power flowed between them, like two forces moving in harmony. But just as quickly, the calmness faltered. The power surged within her, threatening to break free, and the bat's movements became erratic. Lila's heart raced as she fought to regain control, but it felt like the energy was slipping from her grasp. She could feel her fear rising, the doubt creeping in, and she knew that if she didn't focus, it would all unravel. No, she whispered to herself. I can control this. The bat's erratic movements began to settle as Lila focused, pushing away the fear that threatened to overtake her. Slowly, she brought the bat back to her, its wings calming as it landed once more on her arm. She exhaled shakily, sweat beading on her forehead. Good, a voice called out from behind her. Lila turned quickly to see the vampire king approaching, his figure silhouetted against the dark sky. His eyes were unreadable, his expression impossible to decipher. You've made progress, he said, his voice low. But you are still not there yet. Lila nodded, her heart still racing. I know, she replied, her voice quiet. I can feel it slipping away sometimes, like I'm losing control. The vampire king studied her for a long moment, his gaze intense. That is the nature of power. It is not something you can simply command. You must learn to live with it, to control it when it threatens to consume you. Lila swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. I'm trying, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But it's harder than I thought. The vampire king stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Nothing worth having comes easily, he said. You are stronger than you believe, but you must trust yourself. The more you fight the power, the more it will resist you. You must accept it, learn to move with it, not against it. Lila looked down at her hands, the pulse of energy still humming faintly within her. She had never imagined that she would be facing something like this. A power she didn't understand, a connection to creatures she had only ever heard of in legends. And now, she was learning to control it, with the fate of an entire kingdom at stake. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice small. What if I fail? What if I can't control it? What if I hurt someone? The vampire king's expression softened for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Fear is natural, he said, but it will only hold you back. You must trust in your strength, in the power within you. And when you do, you will become more than you ever thought possible. Lila nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in her chest. She had never been a warrior, never been trained to fight. All she had was the power within her and the training the vampire king had given her. But was that enough? How do I know if I'm ready? She asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. The vampire king took a step back, his gaze never wavering. You will know when the time comes, he said. But first, you must understand one thing. There are forces at play in this world, forces that will stop at nothing to claim your power. And when they come, you must be ready. You cannot afford to hesitate. Lila's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? She asked, fear creeping into her voice. The vampire king's eyes darkened, his tone grave. You are not the only one with power, Lila. There are those who would see you fall, who would use your power for their own gain. And they will come for you, just as the shadows of this kingdom are already closing in. Lila felt a chill run through her, but she stood tall, her resolve hardening. She had been thrown into this world, had been made the center of something she didn't understand, and now she was being told that others would try to take her power. She couldn't afford to fail. Not now. I won't let them take it, she said, her voice steady. The vampire king gave her a rare, approving nod. I know you won't, he said. But be prepared. The trials ahead will test you in ways you cannot imagine. With those words, he turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the shadows. Lila stood alone in the courtyard, her heart still pounding in her chest. The vampire king had given her a glimpse of what was to come, and though she was terrified, she knew she had no choice but to face it. She could feel the power within her, and she knew she had to master it before it was too late. The kingdom, and her future, depended on it. The next few days felt like an eternity for Lila. The training had grown even more intense, the vampire king's lessons becoming increasingly demanding. She spent hours each day trying to master the power within her, struggling to tame the chaotic energy that seemed to surge through her with every thought. She could feel it, a pulsating force deep inside her, as if it were a part of her very soul. But the more she trained, the more she realized how little she understood it. The bat, which had once seemed so wild and uncontrollable, had become a constant presence by her side, responding to her commands as if it could feel the power flowing through her. Yet, despite her growing connection to the creature, Lila still struggled with control. Each time she thought she had mastered it, the power would slip away, slipping through her fingers like sand. There were moments when she felt like she was getting closer, moments when she felt in tune with the energy, but those moments were fleeting, and the fear of losing control was always right behind her. One evening, as she sat alone in the training hall, exhausted from another grueling session, the Vampire King entered. His presence seemed to fill the room, a force of nature in itself. Lila looked up at him, her gaze filled with frustration. "I can't do this," she said, her voice breaking the silence. "I keep trying, but every time I think I have control, it slips away." The Vampire King studied her silently for a long moment, his eyes piercing but not unkind. "You're not failing," he said finally. "You're just not ready yet. Power isn't something you can force. It has to be earned, understood, and, most importantly, trusted." Lila felt a sharp pang of doubt. "I don't trust it," she admitted. "I don't trust myself." The Vampire King stepped forward, his voice lowering to a more personal tone. "That is the first thing you must overcome. Fear. Fear of the power. Fear of what it might do. It's not the power that will destroy you, Lila. It's your fear of it." Lila turned away from him, her hands shaking. "How do I stop being afraid?" she asked quietly, almost to herself. "By accepting it," the Vampire King replied, his voice steady and confident. "You must stop fighting it. You must stop seeing it as something outside of yourself. It is you, and you are it. Only when you embrace it will you gain control." Lila swallowed hard, his words sinking in. She had been fighting the power, trying to control it as if it were something foreign. But it was a part of her, something that had always been there, just waiting to be recognized. She closed her eyes, taking a slow, steady breath. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel the power, not as something to control, but as something to be embraced. She opened her eyes, and the bat landed on her outstretched arm, its wings folding gracefully against its body. Lila felt a new connection, a deep, unspoken bond. She no longer saw the bat as an extension of her power. She saw it as a reflection of herself. She was no longer afraid. The power was hers to command, not to control, and as she stood there, Bat perched calmly on her arm, she knew she had taken the first step towards mastering it. The Vampire King watched her with a quiet intensity, his expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence between them, but it was not the same silence as before. It was a quiet understanding. "You're ready," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. Lila looked at him, her heart pounding. "Ready for what?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty she still felt. The Vampire King's eyes softened, and for the first time, Lila saw something in them that resembled pride. "Ready to face what's coming," he said. "The ones who will come for you. The ones who will try to use you. You're ready to protect yourself and to protect this kingdom." Lila's breath caught in her throat. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, her voice shaking slightly. The Vampire King gave her a small, reassuring nod. "You can," he said simply. "You've already proven that." He turned and began to walk toward the door, his cape flowing behind him like a shadow. "Rest now, Lila. Tomorrow we begin." As he left, Lila stood there, feeling the weight of his words settle on her shoulders. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew one thing. There was no turning back now. The power inside her was real, and it was hers to command. The kingdom, and everything she had come to care for, depended on her strength. She would face whatever came next, no matter how terrifying. She was no longer the frightened girl who had stumbled into this world. She was something more, and the time to prove it was almost here. The next day, the tension in the air was palpable. Lila could feel it as soon as she woke up. She had spent the entire night thinking about what the Vampire King had said. She was ready, but was she truly ready? Doubts swirled in her mind, but she knew one thing. There was no turning back now. She had embraced the power inside her, but embracing it was only the first step. Now, she had to use it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lila stood in the same training hall, feeling the familiar weight of the energy within her. The Vampire King stood across from her, his eyes locked onto hers. His expression was stern, but there was something else there, something unspoken. He wasn't just training her anymore. He was preparing her for something much greater. "Today, we test you," he said, his voice low and commanding. "This is not just about control. This is about survival. We have trained for weeks, but the real test is about to begin." Lila felt a knot form in her stomach. She had trained with the bat, learned to focus the power, but she hadn't faced anything like this. "What kind of test?" she asked, her voice betraying the uncertainty she felt. The Vampire King's gaze never wavered. "The test of your strength. The test of your ability to protect yourself, to use the power not just for yourself, but for the kingdom. There are forces at work, Lila. Dark forces that will stop at nothing to claim what you have." Lila's heart raced at the mention of those dark forces. She had heard whispers about them in the castle, but she hadn't yet fully grasped the gravity of their intentions. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rising fear in her chest. The Vampire King's eyes flickered with something akin to approval. "You must face them, and you must do so without hesitation. You will be tested, not just by me, but by the enemies who seek to control you." He raised a hand, and the bat flew from the shadows, landing on Lila's arm as it always did. The bond between them was strong now, undeniable. It was as though the creature knew what was to come, too. The Vampire King motioned toward the far end of the hall, where a door opened into the darkness. "Follow me," he said. Lila's heart thudded in her chest as she followed him, the power inside her seeming to hum with anticipation. She had never been more uncertain, and yet she knew she had to be strong. As they stepped into the dimly lit corridor, the air seemed to grow colder, and the weight of the unknown pressed in on her. "This is where your true test begins," the Vampire King said as they entered a large, open room. The walls were lined with ancient symbols, and the floor was covered in a strange, dark mist. "What is this place?" Lila asked, her voice low. The Vampire King didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the center of the room and turned to face her. "It is a place where the strongest are forged," he said, "and where the weak are broken." Lila's heart skipped a beat. What did he mean by that? Before she could ask, the mist began to swirl around them, coalescing into dark shapes. Figures emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an eerie red light. Lila's breath caught in her throat as she recognized them, the same dark figures she had heard whispers about, the ones who sought her power. "You are not the only one who has been chosen," the Vampire King said, his voice quiet but filled with warning. "These creatures are the ones who will come for you. They seek the power inside you, and they will do anything to claim it. But you will not let them." Lila felt a rush of adrenaline flood her veins. The power inside her stirred, but for the first time, she didn't try to push it away. She allowed it to flow, allowing the energy to fill her. The bat perched on her arm, its wings twitching in anticipation, as if it understood what was happening. The figures in the mist moved toward her, their movements unnatural, like shadows twisting in the dark. Lila took a deep breath, focusing on the energy within her. She felt it surge through her, a force more powerful than she had ever experienced. She raised her hand, and with a single thought, she sent the bat flying toward the dark figures. The bat moved like a streak of shadow, its wings cutting through the air with deadly precision. The creatures hissed in response, but the bat was relentless, its movements fluid and fierce. Lila's heart raced as she watched the creatures falter, the bat's power overwhelming them. For the first time, she felt a sense of control, a sense of confidence. She wasn't just using the power, she was commanding it. As the creatures shrank back, the Vampire King watched her with quiet approval. "Well done," he said, his voice calm but filled with pride. "You've passed the first test." Lila lowered her hand, the bat returning to her side. Her body was trembling with the intensity of the battle, but there was something else inside her now, an understanding, a bond between her and the power she had been so afraid of. She had faced the darkness, and she had fought back. But the battle wasn't over. "The true test will come," the Vampire King said, his voice low. "You've proven yourself today, but there is more to come. You must be prepared." Lila nodded, her mind still racing. She had faced the darkness, but she knew this was just the beginning. The real test was still ahead. The air was thick with tension as the Vampire King led Lila through the corridors of the castle. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts. The test she had faced was only the beginning, and now she knew the real battle was yet to come. The dark figures, the creatures who sought her power, were only a small piece of the puzzle. There were greater forces at play, and she was beginning to understand just how deep those forces ran. As they entered a small, dimly lit chamber, the Vampire King turned to her, his eyes unwavering. "You did well," he said, his voice low and steady. "But this is not over. There are others out there who will stop at nothing to control you." Lila nodded, her mind racing. She had felt the power surge through her in the training room, felt the rush of energy as she commanded the bat to fight. But now, standing before the Vampire King, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the edge of something much darker. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King's eyes darkened. "They are the Council, a group of ancient beings who have watched over this world for centuries. They are the ones who will decide your fate, Lila, and they will not hesitate to destroy anyone who stands in their way." Lila's heart skipped a beat. She had heard of the Council before, but never in such grim terms. She had always thought of them as distant figures, shrouded in mystery, but never imagined they would come after her. "What do they want with me?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. The Vampire King's expression remained unreadable. "They want your power, just as the creatures you faced earlier did. But the difference is, they are not like those monsters. They are ancient, powerful, and they have no patience for anyone who doesn't fall in line." Lila felt a shiver run down her spine. She had faced danger before, but this felt different. The Council wasn't just after her. They were after her power, something far more dangerous than anything she had ever imagined. "How do we stop them?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The Vampire King's gaze softened, but his tone was as firm as ever. "We don't. Not right away. But we prepare. You must learn to control your power fully, and we will need allies. The world is not as it seems, Lila. There are many factions, many hidden forces that you are not yet aware of. The Council will come for you, but we will be ready." Lila swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. She had no idea what he meant by allies, but she knew one thing. She couldn't do this alone. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. The Vampire King's lips curled into a small smile, but it was a smile that held no warmth. "First, you need to train harder, and you need to learn everything you can about the Council and their intentions. We will also need to find those who might stand with us, those who understand the true nature of the power you hold." He paused, his eyes scanning her face as if searching for something. "You are not just a girl anymore, Lila. You are a force to be reckoned with. And with that comes a responsibility you cannot ignore." Lila nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never felt more out of her depth. The Vampire King had trained her, had pushed her to the edge of her abilities, but now she was facing something much bigger. The Council was not some enemy she could defeat with just her powers. They were ancient, and they knew how to play the long game. The Vampire King stepped toward the door, pausing before he left. "I will help you," he said, his voice steady. "But you must trust yourself. Trust the power within you. And remember, the only way to truly control it is to stop fighting it. Accept it as part of who you are." With that, he left, the door closing softly behind him. Lila stood alone in the chamber, her heart racing. The weight of the Vampire King's words pressed down on her like a heavy stone. She wasn't just a girl from a village anymore. She was someone who could change the fate of this world, and with that came a price. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: the power was hers to control. The Council would come for her, but she would be ready. She had to be. The fate of the kingdom, of everything she had come to care for, rested in her hands, and she would not let it slip away. The day had come. Lila stood at the edge of the castle's highest tower, the wind whipping through her hair, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The Vampire King had been preparing her for this moment for weeks, training her relentlessly to control the power that now surged through her veins. She could feel it, thrumming just beneath the surface, alive and ready to be used. The Council would be here soon, and she had to be ready to face them. She had learned to command the bat, to control the energy that flowed through her, but today was different. Today, she would face the true test of her power. Her heart raced in her chest as she thought about everything that had led up to this moment. The Vampire King had warned her that there would be no turning back once she embraced this path. She had trained, she had fought, and she had come to understand her power, but she had also come to realize that the journey was far from over. The council was coming for her, for the power they believed belonged to them. But Lila wasn't going to let them take it. She had come too far. She had too much to lose. You are ready, Lila. The Vampire King's voice broke through her thoughts, calm and steady, as always. She turned to find him standing behind her, his expression unreadable. Are you sure? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The uncertainty still lingered in her chest, but she knew she had no choice now. The Vampire King nodded slowly, his gaze intense. You've faced your fears, learned to control the power within you. You've become something more than you were when you first arrived at this castle. Lila took a deep breath, her heart steadying as she looked out over the vast expanse of the kingdom that stretched before her. I'm ready, she said, her voice firm with determination. I have to be. The Vampire King placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch surprisingly warm despite the cold air. Remember, Lila, your power is not a weapon. It is a part of you. It is not something to be feared. It is something to be embraced. She nodded, her mind now clear, focused. She had been training for this moment, and now she had to face the unknown. The time had come to confront the forces that sought to take everything from her. The council was drawing near, and Lila knew they would stop at nothing to claim her power. But she wasn't going to let them. Not without a fight. The wind howled as the sky above darkened, the first signs of the coming storm. She could feel the presence of the council even before they arrived. It was like a dark cloud gathering in the distance, threatening to engulf everything in its path. But Lila was not afraid. The bat perched on her arm, its wings gently fluttering as if ready to take flight at her command. She reached out and touched it, a silent reassurance, feeling the connection between them. She wasn't alone in this. The Vampire King stood by her side, his presence a reminder that she had come this far because of his guidance, but now it was up to her. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble as the dark figures of the council emerged from the shadows. Their eyes gleamed with malice, their power palpable in the air. They were ancient beings, their presence like a weight pressing down on the very fabric of the world. They had come for her, and Lila could feel the power within her surge in response, ready to fight. The Vampire King stepped forward, his eyes never leaving the council. This ends now, he said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority. You will not have her. The leader of the council, a tall figure with eyes like burning coals, stepped forward. You think you can protect her? He asked, his voice dripping with disdain. She belongs to us. Her power is ours to control. Lila felt the energy inside her flare up at his words, the bat beside her stirring as if in response. No, she said, her voice steady, stronger than it had ever been. I am not a weapon for you to control. I am not your tool. The leader of the council sneered. You do not understand what you are up against, he said, his voice laced with venom. The power you hold is not yours to wield. It will destroy you, just as it has destroyed others before you. Lila stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. I am not afraid, she said, her voice filled with conviction. I control this power, and I will not let you take it. The air around them crackled with energy as the council's figures closed in, but Lila stood firm. She could feel the power inside her, a force she had once feared, now hers to command. The bat took flight, soaring above her as she raised her hand, calling the energy to her. The council's leader looked at her with contempt, but Lila could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He had underestimated her. She could feel it, the power was hers. The battle between them erupted with a burst of energy, but Lila was ready. She wielded the power with precision, not out of fear, but out of a deep understanding of what it meant to control it. The council's leader faltered as the energy enveloped him, his form dissipating into the shadows. One by one, the other figures of the council fell, their power unable to match the strength of the bond Lila had formed with her own abilities. As the last of the council's members disappeared, the air cleared, the tension lifting from the room. Lila stood victorious, her heart still pounding in her chest, but now with a sense of peace. The battle was over. The Vampire King stepped forward, a rare smile on his face. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You've proven that you are more than the power within you. You are a force in your own right." Lila turned to face him, a quiet smile on her lips. "We did it," she corrected, her voice filled with gratitude. "I could never have done this without you." The Vampire King nodded, his gaze softening. "You are no longer just a girl. You are the protector of this kingdom." Lila looked out over the horizon once more, the storm now past, the sky clearing. She had embraced the power within her, and in doing so, she had become something more than she had ever imagined. The kingdom was safe, for now, and as the sun began to rise, she knew her journey was just beginning. Vampire stories have always captivated readers with their dark allure and complex characters, and this story is no exception. Follow the journey of a young girl who unexpectedly becomes entwined with the Vampire King and discovers a power within herself that changes everything. As Lila embraces her newfound abilities, she faces not only the challenge of controlling a dangerous power, but also the looming threat of dark forces determined to claim it. From the intense training with the Vampire King to the final confrontation with powerful enemies, this story weaves suspense, action, and the timeless themes of power and self-discovery. Like all great vampire stories, the stakes are high, and the path to victory is fraught with danger. As Lila's bond with the Vampire King grows stronger, she must navigate a world filled with shadowy creatures, ancient councils, and the constant struggle between light and darkness. Will she embrace her role as a protector, or will the forces seeking her power overwhelm her? Dive into this world of intrigue and supernatural conflict as you experience one of the most captivating vampire stories. In the end, Lila's journey is a testament to the power of self-discovery, the strength that comes with acceptance, and the fight against forces beyond one's control. This is a story for anyone who loves vampire stories filled with action, mystery, and a touch of romance.